Good evening, everyone. I'm really glad to be back with you again. And tonight I'm going to be speaking to a very dear friend, someone I've known for a long time and collaborated with on Syria, on Palestine. Amal Wahdan, based in the occupied territories of Palestine, a veteran activist, Palestinian nationalist, a member of various movements for for example, the One Democratic State of Palestine, which we'll talk about, and a founding member of the Syria Support Movement, which stood in solidarity with Syria during the attempt to topple the Syrian government and to destabilize and partition the Syrian nation itself, which of course we know is a failed campaign, but has left Syria wounded and with its resources occupied by the US and US cartel proxies in the northeast and in the northwest, and is still fighting a war against those terrorist groups on multiple fronts. Amal, welcome, and it's really lovely to be talking to you.
Oh, thanks, Vanessa. It's nice to be with you again.
I wanted to, first of all, because, I think in much of the coverage of what has been happening since October the 7th, we haven't, obviously, we hear the usual nonsense from the Western communities, the international law community about two states for Palestine. The two-state solution for Palestine. Can you explain to people why the two-state solution was in reality never really going to be viable? And what, in your view, is the alternative solution that people should be supporting on behalf of Palestine and that Palestinians should be working towards?
Yes, next month on the 13th of September, it will be 31 years since the PLO leadership signed the Oslo Agreement in the White House. It's not a surprise that the USA has actually architectured this whole scheme for us as Palestinians and for others, between brackets, peace agreement between the Palestinians and the Israelis. And this agreement, actually, the Israelis took everything and they left the Palestinians with almost nothing. On the contrary, much more of the country, as we are speaking now, Palestine is one entity and it's all occupied. They occupied 78% of it in 1948, but now, and after 31 years of this nonsense, or what we call it, the two-state illusion, is being, imposed on the Palestinians without their agreement, without their approval. This leadership was hijacking everything that the Palestinians had worked for, let's say, 5 decades when they signed this agreement. And we had the Intifada, the first Intifada going on. And we had a unified national leadership for the Intifada. And I was one of those who actually worked for this, who actually I was involved in even writing the first statement that announced the unified leadership of the Intifada, and that was in January 8, 1988. And the Intifada, if you recall, and your audience recall, has captured the eyes of the whole world as a peaceful Intifada or non-violent Intifada, and it was called sometimes the children with stones, or the Intifada, because it was actually children were using the stones to defend their rights of existing on their land and to liberate the occupied land. And we were really we're hoping that things will move on gradually, but not into the direction of Madrid conference and later on the Oslo Agreement. As I said, we were a national liberation movement, and we were trying to liberate our land from the occupiers, not to recognize the colonial apartheid state of Israel, which was, which was occupying 78% in 1948, and then occupied the rest of Palestine. So it was for us a shock to see that the leadership, instead of investing in the Intifada, instead of building a national strategy to liberate, at least to liberate the occupied territories of 67 and to continue on to liberate the rest of Palestine from this colonial entity, we've seen them signing an agreement that gave the Israelis more than even they were dreaming. From one side, it didn't give the Palestinians any sovereignty. So the borders were in the hands of the Israelis. Land, sea, and air, it was all under the Israelis. All ports, land ports, were under the control of the Israelis. And they divided the West Bank and Gaza into A, B, and C. Later on, Gaza, they withdrew from Gaza, unilaterally, without any agreement in 2005. And they later on left Gaza under siege for 17 years. So going back to this agreement, we could see that the Israelis, from the beginning, when they signed this agreement, they wanted to continue acting to accomplish the Zionist project, their genuine project, which they were working on for decades. And this strategy for them has not changed. If we want to talk about 1948, they were like fourth grade citizens. They were treated discriminately and with racist laws against them. And they were bragging into the whole world that it's the only democracy in the Middle East, while they were treating 1.8 million people as fourth state for great citizens. So the situation in 1948 was horrible. People could not even have the freedom to build on their own lands, in their villages and towns. The Israelis continued their project of seizing lands and building new settlements, what they called, regional councils and blah, blah, blah. This was actually seizing more and more land from Palestinians who continued to live in 1948, Palestine of 1948. And they did the same with the rest of Palestine when they occupied Gaza, East Jerusalem, and the West Bank. So what we are seeing today is more and more seizure of lands, stealing the lands. Up until now, And people are astonished to see that the settlers now are in control of the West Bank, and annexation is not the name of the game anymore. It's more than that. It's ethnic cleansing. And what we have been seeing in Jenin, Tulkarem, Nablus, Qalqilia, mainly those areas in north of Palestine, north of the West Bank, is action or acts of ethnic cleansing, acts of genocide. Just in 48 hours, they killed 18 people, and they destroyed the majority of the refugee camps, and they concentrate on the refugee camps because they don't want these refugee camps to remain in existence. They want to destroy anything that relates to the 1948 Nakba or catastrophe. So what we see, what we have been seeing in the West Bank did not start after October 7, but it accelerated, and it went viral and more vicious and more aggressive against citizens. Now we cannot move from one city to another without going through checkpoints or without being harassed by acting now as militias that is part of the part of the Israeli army. And Ben Gvir has announced that he is going to arm all people, all settlers in the West Bank, as he wanted to do in 1948 as well. He opened the police station in the north, just close to the borders with Lebanon, and asked people to come and arm themselves, to defend themselves, in between brackets, of course, because they're the aggressors. So in this situation, there is no such thing. I don't want to be impolite, actually, as two-state solution. Now the Americans and the Europeans are reiterating this broken record of the two-state solution. Where were they 31 years when they signed this agreement, and it was supposed to be in action within 5 years? They killed Rabin. These same people who are controlling the colonial apartheid state of Israel are the same ones who killed Rabin at that time. And Rabin wasn't a saint in regard to the Palestinian cause. He was one of them. He was part of these militias who committed the same crimes in 1948 and prior to 1948, and they continued to do the same even after they announced their fabricated state. So the militias at that time are the Israeli army now and the settlers. They're just the same roots, the same actions, the same aggressive measures that happened 1948 is happening right now. The confiscations of land during that time and the confiscation of land today. So the whole record of this colonial apartheid entity is just the same. Confiscation of land, ethnic cleansing, building more settlers, bringing more immigrants. Thanks God now, after October 7, people are leaving. I mean, the settlers, the colonists who came here at the expense of the Palestinians are now leaving what they imagined to be their lives' dreams, the honey and the milk country. Now it's not anymore. They lack security everywhere in Palestine because people are fed with the occupation. People are fed with being victims, with being the killed ones. They revolted at all peoples who endured colonization and occupation. We have the same right as other people to defend ourselves. And it's time for the Palestinians, after not only 76 years, 76 years in formality, but it was over a century now that we have been going through the same terrorist actions by the same Zionist militia groups. Terrorist groups who did the same before and continued to do the same. When we look into Gaza today, for example, I mean, I can't believe my eyes. I can't believe that we are looking into a place that once was, a home of 2.3 million people. It's a wreck now. You can't recognize, people even cannot recognize where their homes are any longer. They are searching to see where their homes. So with all what is happening, the Americans continue, and their allies, of course, the EU is not better, or the UK. UK is hand in hand with the imperialist USA, and the EU is just another partner. We can't even listen to their rhetoric, to their insult to the Palestinian people, trying to sell us the same rotten product again. There is no such thing. The people are not accepting this anymore. That's why you see people are taking matters into their hands, because they are fed up with continue to live under the same situation.
Amal, you mentioned there about Yitzhak Rabin, and of course we should talk about Yasser Arafat. But when you talk about the Oslo Agreement, of course, many people describe Yitzhak Rabin as the peacemaker. And you alluded to the fact, that he was still one of them. He was still very much a Zionist. He was still very much an expansionist Zionist. He brought in the policy of breaking their bones, I believe, was under his instructions.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that he was killed. And of course, many people hold that up. The fact that Arafat was killed and Rabin was killed is because they were trying to bring peace to the region. You've explained many of the reasons why actually this was a betrayal of Palestine. It actually resulted in more Palestinian land being taken. It resulted in the complete eradication of the Palestinian cause, effectively, right, and the sovereignty of Palestine. So, in your opinion, did Yitzhak Rabin change his policy? Was he assassinated because he was trying to actually end the process of genocide and ethnic cleansing, or is it something else?
Well, no, actually, as I said, Rabin was in the States at that moment, and he came back after the Intifada, the first Intifada broke out. And as you mentioned, he was the one behind the broken bones. And I would assume that someone who has a history of being a member of the Zionist terrorist groups who committed the heinous atrocities against the Palestinian people in 1948 against civilians, because at that time people didn't have the adequate even, rifles. There were no machine guns, there were no hand grenades or the militias, the terrorist Zionist militias, were equipped by the British, and they were getting arms from different sources of the world to fight the Palestinians and to steal their lands. And Rabin was one of those people. How would he even think of making a peace treaty with the Palestinians? You know, you could see him, you know, shaking hands with Yasser Arafat, but you can see that Yasser Arafat was approaching him, not vice versa. He was hesitant even to shake hands with Yasser Arafat, even if we want to assume Yasser Arafat had a good intention. You know, he wanted to liberate at least the 1967 territories, the occupied territories of 1967. But of course, this miscalculation has caused us a lot. He was in favor of making this peace agreement and recognizing the colonizer, taking more than 78% of our land. As I said, well, what Arafat's intentions were at that time is not the subject now, because we can see what's the real intentions of Rabin and his people. And I remember that Beres in 1996, he mentioned that the real reason behind the Oslo Agreement is to open up, you know, the way, the path towards making other peace treaties with other Arab countries and to do business with these Arab countries. So the main goal for them was economical. They wanted to open more doors
but for
their,
Israel, not for Palestine.
Yes, for the Israelis, of course, for for their plans, you know, to control. You know, even this was not a logic plan for Paris, but that's the intention. And if we recall, at that time when they signed this agreement, South Africa had an agreement, and they were able to get, you know, to end the political apartheid, but they couldn't end the economic apartheid, which is still, until now, is under the control of the white man. So in the same period of time when they signed the agreement, the Oslo Agreement, they signed this agreement. Of course, they disarmed the ANC at the time, and they disarmed the Sinn Féin in Ireland. And we can see the end story, you know, where is Ireland right now? And South Africa, of course, they gained their political freedom, but as I said, the economy is not in the hands of the indigenous people of South Africa. And look at us, where we ended after 31 years. We ended of being not only occupied, of being ethnic cleansing day after day. Gaza is a very clear example of the real intentions of these of this Zionist entity. And what was happening in the West Bank, occupied West Bank and Jerusalem before October 7 is another example that they don't want any peace. They don't want any Palestinian, full stop. That's it. This is for them, this is what God promised them. Of course, we don't believe in this myth, and they continue, you know, to market this product to the world, but it's been refuted even by their own historians. Shlomo Sand wrote about the invention of the state of Israel and the invention of the Jewish people. There is no such thing. And it's their historians now who face this reality and who are speaking loudly about it. Now, what's happening in the other side, I mean, within the colonist front, internal front, it is another story. There is clashes among the Zionist bloc itself,
Yeah.
and there is also contradictions and frictions with the liberal Zionist and with the secular Zionist. And you can't see much from Peace Now, for example, Peace Now movement. You
Yes.
can't hear them. They just vanished among these Zionist religious parties led by Ben Gvir and Smotrich. And of course, Netanyahu is not better. The Likud party is not better than this. The whole society is being drifted towards the right, more towards the right. And I feel like, I mean, it's history lessons, like when any empire reaches its peak, they start to, get more criminal. They start to commit more crimes against the indigenous people because they know that they are descending.
Yeah.
And they are facing this existential threat among themselves and towards the Palestinians and among the axis of resistance, if we want to talk about the region as a whole, because Palestine is part of this region and part of this globe, and what's happening in Palestine is affecting the regional countries and affecting other liberation movements around us in Lebanon, in Yemen, in Iraq, in Syria, even Syria under this situation, and after 12 years of continuous proxy war led by the US against them and being 1/3 of Syria being occupied by the US, even that didn't, stop them from being or acting as part of the axis of resistance. So we're seeing a lot of changes, but during this time, the Palestinians are paying a dear front. But also we have to look at the whole situation here with hopeful, or good
Optimistic,
wishes.
yeah.
Yes. I mean, Gaza have opened the eyes of the whole world about the real nature of this vicious and criminal entity. What Israel was enjoying before as a democratic and a member state of the international community, now it's being accused of committing genocide and crimes against humanity and war crimes. And Netanyahu himself is wanted by the ICC. So as we say, Gaza has liberated the whole world, not only the Palestinians, but the whole world, because they can see now that their own governments are the ones who are supporting this criminal entity in Palestine, as is supporting other criminal entities in the area, and they can see the money that they've been paying, and with the tax money that has been paid to these governments, whether in the States or in Europe, is being used the wrong way against their own well, against their own interest as well, because we can see how Europe is enduring lots of financial problems and political problems. It's drifting towards the right, more towards Nazi ideology. And Ukraine has, I mean, made it very clear that Europe is going the wrong path. And who is driving the whole, the whole globe into continuous conflicts and wars? It's the U.S. The U.S. has driven Europe into this war between Ukraine and Russia. And we know that the NATO is behind this war, as the US was behind the proxy war in Syria and Iraq and in Libya and other places. And now Palestine, after all these years, as if they wanted to try, toppling Syria in order to draw a different map for the Middle East, and blocking the access of resistance. And they didn't succeed in their scheme in Syria, in Iraq as well, though Iraq is a different story. So they now went to the Palestinian people.
And Amal, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I just wanted, because we were talking about the Oslo Agreement, and I wanted to link the Oslo Agreement, which, as you've described, was a betrayal of the Palestinian cause, Palestinian nationalism, and the right to exist for Palestine, and the right to return, of course, for all those who were expelled forcibly during the Nakba of 1948. But I want to fast forward to the Trump administration, Zionist Central, as it should be called, I think, and to the Abraham Accords, which were brought in, of course, under the control of Jared Kushner, his son-in-law. And to an extent, would you say that that's almost an extension of what they tried to do with the Oslo Agreement? In other words, you talked about this economic vision they had of basically securing the support of the regional states. And of course, if we go back to the clean break doctrine, that's exactly what they were talking about in 1997, when Netanyahu was a minister in government back then, that they were talking about basically winning over the regional states. And we know that the Abraham Accords tried to do exactly this. It tried to create the economic bridges between, as we know, the UAE, Bahrain, Qatar, Saudi Arabia. Egypt was already normalized under the Camp David agreements in 1979. So do you think the Abraham Accords was basically like a finishing off of what they tried to achieve with the Oslo Agreement?
Yes, this was their vision, and Trump, as being, vicious and a true criminal, I would say, he went ahead with everything that the Israelis wanted. He moved the American embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. And by the way, they confiscated this land, and people who own the land were trying to raise a case against them. And he recognized Jerusalem as the eternal capital for the Israelis, and signed these peace treaties between brackets with the Emirates, United Arab Emirates, Morocco, Bahrain, and they are now anxious to finish the deal with the Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
They think that the Israelis are still, acting as a state, they don't, and I think this is their illusion again. They work according to their, ambitious plans, controlling the world, hegemony of the world. But they don't see the faults, even the faults that this U.S. political system is descending, is losing on the international theater. We can see that the Americans are being contained. Of course, they are still agitating several parts in the world, and they are instigating wars and internal conflicts. But in real and actual meaning, this is an act of someone who is losing. There is no such thing as unipolar any longer. There is no such U.S. being the superpower. Of course, they are super in destructing the world, in making more and more wars, instigating more wars, but they no longer are effective even within their political system and their economy. We can see that their economy is also going down. And there is a rising front, or I would say a new world system, a multipolar system that is confronting the US and the EU together. And if we talk in figures, whether in population or GPA or economy or what have you, the multipolar system exceeds that of the unipolar system. And I would assume that all these schemes, which meant to hinder any real sovereignty for the countries of the area, our area, the pan-Arab homeland, and controlling the wealth of these nations, oil, gas, etc. And by the way, the oil and gas of Gaza are one of the big reasons for this war that is going on right there. And they want to block the Russians and the Chinese from entering this world, and they want to hinder the movement and the advancement that the Chinese are having in Africa. So what is going on in Gaza, as I said, is part of the regional and global picture, and it won't happen as they imagine. The end result is not going to be fruitful, whether for the US and or whether for the Zionist colonial entity in Palestine. And we know that this colonial entity wouldn't last for this almost 11 months of continuous war and attrition war if it wasn't for the US. The US has been, pouring assistance to them, whether in arms or in money, in diplomacy, in the UN, etc. So we can see that this is a fabricated entity that serves the interests of the US and its bloc, of course. And that's why the Americans are so eager to assist, or as they say, help the Israelis defend themselves. And they don't have any ethics whatsoever. They don't even see, I don't assume that those in the Congress who were, clapping for Netanyahu during his speech really know what's going on in our part of the world and know what is going to happen to their part of the world as well. Like 10 minutes of a 40-minute speech being interrupted by claps and by cheering. And this makes them part of the crime. This is indictment for all of those who were clapping for Netanyahu in the Congress. So this teach us, or this shows us that the US is totally involved in this world, in this war against the Palestinian, and the blood of our children in Gaza and in the West Bank is at the hands of the US as much as it is at the hands of the Zionist leadership and army. So both of them are connected together in this crime against the Palestinian people. And while we see the gradual decline of the USA, we are seeing as well the decline of this colonial apartheid state in Palestine. And there is no solution except for one solution, but who is going to listen to this solution under this circumstances, under this savage and barbaric and Nazi war that is going on against the Gazans or against the Palestinians in the West Bank. And we are actually, we are seeing that this is going to continue in the West Bank, because this is also the main goal for the Israelis. They want to establish the fact that the West Bank is theirs, and they are gonna do whatever they can in order to capture the West Bank, whether by existential, genocide, whether is it extermination, ethnic cleansing, all of that together. They wanted to get hold of the West Bank. Now the question is whether they're gonna achieve what they are planning to, or whether they're gonna be defeated as they have been defeated during these 11 months in Gaza.
Amal,
and we know the answer, actually.
Yes, yes, they haven't succeeded militarily in Gaza, despite the horrific slaughter of defenseless civilians.
The thing is, we are the people of the land. That's why we have nowhere else to go, and we are not intending to go anywhere, because we are blended with this land. And as they were also defeated in Syria and Iraq and other places as well, they're going to be defeated in Palestine.
Amal, we mentioned, I just want to very quickly touch on the one democratic state of Palestine, because I know people think, there's no solution, or as we've talked about, they go straight for this cosmetic cure of the two-state solution, which has been dead in the water for decades. But what people don't understand is that the Palestinians themselves have what is, I believe, a very wise and a very humane and a very constructive solution, which is this one democratic state. Can you just quickly, if you can, just talk about what this idea is, what it could lead to?
Mm-hmm. First of all, the one democratic state, of course, it will work perfectly for the Palestinian people, because the right of return will be immediately in action. It will allow 7 million people to return to their country, and this is their right. It's not something that we grant or that the international community grant them. It is their right to return to their home. The one democratic state gives the chance for the Palestinians and for whoever want, from, if we want to call them, the Jewish people or the residents of this country, if they want to live in equal terms with the Palestinians, if they want to be on equal stand, one vote, one man, there is a chance for this. But really, under this pressure of the current situation, I can't see any other situation. We've been talking about this. We've been calling for this in order to dismantle this regime of apartheid and criminal regime, and build on top of that this democracy, this democratic state for all people. This is the only chance that we can stop this war. But as I said, in these circumstances now, people who really want to put an end to this vicious and criminal and barbaric fascist war, they have to turn their eyes into a real solution. The two-state illusion is dead. It has been born dead, and 31 years has proved that. On the contrary, we can have a future here. And of course, this future is going to happen with resistance. We can't, to reach a once democratic state, we have to go through what we are doing exactly right now. Resisting this mentality, resisting the Nazi, fascist, terrorist, racist mentality. That's the first step towards building one democratic state for all. And without that, I'm afraid that there is no other solution except, a continuation of what's going on right now. But let's be hopeful that there is, a light at the end of the tunnel. Not only militants, but also there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And this solution, this one state solution, will diffuse the tense and the pressure that is going on in the whole Middle East, because this entity, this colonial entity, is endangering not only this part of the world, endangering the whole world, and endangering peace, prosperity, and security in the whole region and in the whole world. And that's why it is very important to dismantle the basic pillars of this entity, whether military, security, economy, politics, what have you, and have a state that is friendly with other countries of the area and with other countries of the world.
No, absolutely. Amal, just finally, what is it like living where you are now? Has the atmosphere changed? Because I know the Israeli army has increased its operations in the areas that you mentioned to the north of the West Bank. How is the atmosphere generally in the West Bank right now?
Actually, we sleep on while there are incursions and shootings and exchange of fire. And we hope that next morning we won't have a real catastrophe like we did yesterday and the day before yesterday.
Yeah.
You never know. Where I live in between the Israeli army military headquarters in a settlement they called Betrayal, which is like 1 kilometer away from where I'm living. And it's been built on the top of the lands of Albire people. And my grandfather and my father had land on that in that settlement. They confiscated in the 80s, early 80s. And between the headquarters of Abu Mazen, the Palestinian Authority. I mean, Abu Mazen, he's less than 300 meters away from the headquarters of the Israeli army. It takes them one small size rocket, missile, to hit the Abu Mazen headquarters. This is and we can see or hear the chapter going back and forth. Yesterday they brought him from Saudi Arabia. I guess he was trying to make a deal with the Saudis not to sign any agreement with any normalization with the Israelis and other stuff. Of course, he probably wanted more money from the Saudis. And the situation is very tense. I cannot commute securely from one place to another. Like we have relatives in Jericho. It's around about 35 minutes here, but we pass through settlements and we pass through an area where some Bedouins were living, and the settlers confiscated this area. So it's not secure for us to drive through that area. If I want to go to Nablus, for example, or to Bethlehem, I have to go through also settlements. And it's the settlers are unleashed and they are very vicious, with very, distorted heads. They even kill sheep in the field. And they burn olive trees. I mean, they do lots of atrocities to the Palestinians, and no one can control them. We were trying even to get our land back from the settlements, because people here, most of them carry U.S. citizenship, and we try to even take them to court in the U.S. We are working on it, but we don't know if it's going to work or no, with the Americans being what they are, criminal as this Zionist leadership.
Amal, I know that your name in Arabic means hope, and even though you've described really brilliantly the horrors of living under occupation, and it's not only occupation, as you said before we started talking, it's a war of extermination that Palestinians are facing, but I think all of us across the world can learn so much from this continued hope and optimism, resilience, resourcefulness, everything that Palestinians have demonstrated for 100 years, And so I want to personally thank you for everything that you do and that all Palestinians do to actually awake the humanity in all of us, because under the current regimes in the West, we're being pushed to an abyss of even abandoning our humanity, I think.
Right.
Deliberately, And so let's really, let's stay in touch. And I know that many people are standing in solidarity with you and are also getting punished for doing so. But I think you're right.
Exactly.
I think we are going through an incredibly difficult transformation in the world. And Palestine is on the front lines of the resistance against the hegemony of the Western neo-colonialists and you know, neo-imperialists. Not that they ever really stopped being imperialist. So let's pray, let's hope that we see a turning of the tide very soon for the sake of the Palestinians, because, you know,
definitely
the suffering is too much, really.
Yes. Bloodshed, too much bloodshed.
So thank you so much, Amal. Yes.
You're welcome, dear. You're welcome. And it's good to talk to you.
And you. Take care. And we'll speak again very soon.
Inshallah. Great. Thanks, Vanessa.